Johnny and June Cash's former property in Hendersonville is one of the most famous pieces of land in Middle Tennessee.
And there's a plan in the works that would transform that piece of land by the lake, but not everyone's happy about it.
Some of the most famous homes in America are sitting empty right now. Ranches that once hosted presidents, pop stars, and private jets. Estates that cost tens of millions to build. Today, the gates are locked, the pools are cracked, and the listings keep dropping year after year. What happened to these places? Why would a property once worth $100 million suddenly struggle to sell at $31 million? Some were abandoned overnight. Some sold at auction for pennies. And a few hide stories so strange that even real estate agents now call them toxic. The truth is stranger than the prices. Neverland Ranch, Michael Jackson, bought a 2,700-acre ranch in Los Olivos, California in 1988 for $19.5 million. Years earlier, while visiting Paul McCartney during the filming of the Say, Say, Say music video, he had fallen in love with the place. Once it became his, he gave it a new name that matched the dream in his head. He called it Neverland. And from there, he did not hold back. Over the next 15 years, Jackson poured money into the ranch as if there were no limit at all. The property became something between a private estate, a fantasy world, and a full amusement park. There were 3 separate railroads, including a 3-foot narrow gauge line with a steam locomotive named Catherine, after his mother. There was a Ferris wheel, a carousel, bumper cars, a pirate ship ride, a roller coaster, and a full arcade. The zoo had giraffes, an elephant, chimpanzees, and exotic birds. In 1991, Elizabeth Taylor married Larry Fortensky there. By the time Jackson's molestation trial began in 2005, Neverland had become the most photographed private estate in the world. Then everything changed. After his acquittal in June 2005, Jackson left. He moved to Bahrain under the protection of Sheikh Abdullah, and from that point on, he never returned to Neverland again. The place that had once been filled with lights, music, animals, guests, and motion was suddenly left behind. Then, in February 2008, financial title companies sent a letter warning that unless Jackson paid $24,525,906.61 by March 19th, the land, buildings, rides, trains, and art would all be sold at public auction. Colony Capital stepped in before that could happen. It took a majority stake and kept the ranch off the auction block. Jackson still held 87.5% ownership through a joint venture structure. But by then, the amusement park was already being taken apart. When Jackson died on June 25, 2009, the property slipped even deeper into silence. The ranch sat abandoned. Gardens grew wild, pipes cracked. Woodpeckers chewed through the Disney-style train station. The animal enclosures stood empty. The rides had already been disassembled and auctioned off in 2008. And many of them later turned up at county fairs across the United States, still carrying small signs that pointed back to their Neverland past. So even after the dream was gone, pieces of it kept moving through America without him. In May 2015, the estate returned to the market under a different name. It was listed as Sycamore Valley Ranch, which was the original name William Bone had given it in 1981 before Jackson ever saw it. The asking price was $100 million. Colony North Star had spent millions on renovations, but none of that brought in a buyer. No one made an offer. In 2017, the price was cut to $67 million. Still nothing. Then, in February 2019, just days before HBO released Leaving Neverland, which brought the sexual abuse allegations against Jackson back into public view through interviews with Wade Robson and James Safechuck, the listing dropped again to $31 million. By then, real estate experts were openly calling the property toxic. Circle G Ranch, before Elvis Presley died in 1977, he owned a piece of land that meant far more to him than most people realized. In fact, He once told his cousin, Donna Presley, that it was the closest he ever came to feeling like a normal man. That alone says a lot about what the place gave him. It began in February 1967. Elvis was driving back from a late-night horse buying trip with Priscilla, Jerry Schilling, Sandy, and Alan Fortas when he noticed a 55-foot white cross rising over a farm on Highway 301 in Horn Lake, Mississippi, just 10 miles south of Graceland. The property was known as Twinkletown Farm. Elvis saw it, stopped, and immediately told Fortas to go to the door and make an offer. He ended up paying $437,000 for 150 acres, a small red brick cottage, cattle, and farm equipment, even using Graceland itself as collateral. Just a few months later, on May 1, 1967, he married Priscilla in Las Vegas. And instead of easing into married life somewhere glamorous, the couple went straight from the Aladdin Hotel to the Mississippi Ranch. Elvis renamed it Circle G in honor of his mother Gladys, and the place quickly became more than land. It became a private little world. Priscilla later wrote that it was the first place she truly felt like a wife. There, she could wake Elvis in the morning, cook him breakfast, and iron his shirts the way her mother had taught her. There were no maids, no housekeepers, no polished distance between them and ordinary life. For 2 years, they lived in a mobile home trailer on the property. Around them, Elvis's closest entourage each had their own trailer, too. The days there felt simple in a way Elvis almost never got to experience. They spent weekends target shooting, hunting frogs, and riding horses. Lisa Marie was almost certainly conceived there. So while Graceland became the symbol the whole world knows, Circle G may have been the place where Elvis actually felt most at peace. But that peace did not last. On May 20, 1969, Elvis sold the ranch for $440,000 to a group of Northeastern investors. After that, the property began a long and painful slide. Over the next 50 years, it passed through the hands of a cattle business, a Mexican restaurant, a shooting club, and a florist who briefly lived in the honeymoon cottage. Little by little, the place lost its shape and its meaning. By 2013, the Society for Commercial Archaeology had named Circle G one of America's most endangered roadside places. The barbecue pit Elvis once used for cookouts had nearly crumbled away. The stables were no longer usable. The cottage at Goodman Road and Highway 301, where Elvis and Priscilla spent the first nights of their marriage, stood boarded up and half hidden behind overgrown trees. Then came another attempt to save it. In 2014, a group of investors led by Mississippi native David "Buddy" Reynolds Jr. bought the ranch and promised a revival. They said they would restore the honeymoon cottage, create an equine therapy program for veterans with PTSD, and build an outdoor amphitheater. At the same time, the Circle G Foundation, a fan group started by British Elvis supporter Leslie Pilling, began raising money alongside them. For a moment, it looked like the story might finally turn. The property was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 2019. Then, in September 2021, a historical marker was unveiled, becoming the first Mississippi State historical marker ever paid for by international donations. But the marker could not stop the decay. By 2024, the Circle G Foundation had launched a formal petition accusing the McLemore family, who had acquired ownership, of neglect and broken promises. The group called them unfit custodians and urged the state of Mississippi to consider eminent domain. Fans from all over the world signed. What made it sting even more was the contrast everyone could see so clearly. Graceland still stands proudly in Memphis, while just 10 miles south in Horn Lake, the ranch Elvis once called home was falling apart in plain sight. Beaver Dam Farms. Kenny Rogers grew up poor in the Houston projects, and that stayed with him. Long before fame, long before sold-out crowds, he had a very simple picture of what wealth looked like. It was not diamonds or chandeliers or long driveways. It was sprinklers. He once said that as a child, he would walk past the houses of rich people and stop cold at the sight of water spraying across their lawns. That image stuck in his mind. So when he finally had money, he built his dream around it. That dream became Beaver Dam Farms. Starting in the late 1980s and continuing for the better part of 15 years, Rogers created a sprawling estate on 953 acres of rolling Georgia hills just east of Athens, about 90 minutes from Atlanta. He designed the 12,000-square-foot main house himself, and every part of the estate reflected the scale of his ambition. There were 5 guest houses, a clubhouse, a lake clubhouse, 3 private spring-fed lakes, 2 swimming pools, 2 clay tennis courts, and a 2-acre under-roof equestrian center with 44 stalls. He also built an 18-hole championship-rated golf course, inspired in part by Augusta National, which sits about 100 miles away. It was not just a home. It was a full world he had shaped with his own hands and taste. And at the center of all that beauty was still the child who loved sprinklers. According to interviews, Rogers used to wake up early, sit on the golf course, and simply watch them come on. That quiet image says almost everything. For him, Beaver Dam Farms was not just a luxury property. It was proof that the life he once imagined from a distance had finally become real. In 2003, Rogers sold the estate to Weston Adams, who also owned a sportsman's lodge in Colorado. For a few years, the Adams family used it as a private residence. Later, they turned it into an inclusive resort with spa services, event rentals, and full accommodations. But after Weston Adams died in 2011, the future of the property became uncertain. His family tried to sell it. They listed it for $20 million. Then they waited. Nothing happened. By May 2016, with the family now based on the West Coast and the Georgia estate slowly wearing down through disuse, they gave up on the normal sales process and moved to auction. The minimum bid was set at $3.5 million, and the property would be sold fully furnished. That number felt shocking when placed next to what the estate was thought to be worth. The Accelerated Marketing Group, which ran the auction, estimated the replacement cost at between $30 million and $40 million. Even Rogers, who was then 77 and in the middle of his Gambler's Last Deal farewell tour, stepped in to promote the auction himself. In a public statement, he admitted that he still dreamed about playing the golf course 2 or 3 times a week. That made the result feel even sadder. When the auction closed on July 9, 2016, the final price was roughly $3.5 million. That was 82.5% below the original $20 million listing and around 90% below the estimated replacement cost. At that price, the buyer got an estate Rogers had spent years building, along with all the original furnishings. It was the kind of sale that makes a dream feel strangely fragile. A place that had once represented success at the highest level was suddenly changing hands for a fraction of what it had cost to create. Casa de Shenandoah. At the corner of Sunset and Pecos Roads in Las Vegas, a hand-carved letter N still marks the entrance to one of the strangest celebrity estates in America. That property is Casa de Shenandoah, and its story stretches across decades of ambition, money, image, and legal chaos. Wayne Newton began building it in 1976, when he was just 34 years old. But the roots go back even further. In 1966, he bought the first 5 acres of empty desert there for what he later described as almost nothing. Then he kept expanding. By 1972, he had grown the property to 39 acres. By 1976, he had 120 Arabian horses breeding on site. And by 1978, he had completed the white Southern-style mansion that became the centerpiece of the estate. It cost $4 million to build at the time, which would be about $18 million today, and Newton said he designed almost every square foot himself. That already would have been a lot. But for Newton, a mansion was only the beginning. At its peak, Casa de Shenandoah had 9 residences, 50 horse stalls, a 100-car museum, and an exotic animal facility filled with dogs, ducks, peacocks, zebras, monkeys, and, according to local rumor, even a giraffe. Newton also kept a Learjet parked on the property, even though McCarran International Airport was only 10 minutes away. Inside the main house, he displayed a guitar Elvis Presley had once given him. The whole estate felt less like a home and more like a monument to a certain version of fame. Bigger, stranger, more theatrical, more Las Vegas. Then the money started slipping away. The 2008 financial crisis hit Newton hard. By 2010, he was in bankruptcy proceedings and moving out of the home he had lived in for 44 years. That June, he sold the ranch to a development company called CSD LLC for $18.7 million, while keeping a 20% stake and another 10 acres across the street for $10 million. The idea was to turn Casa de Shenandoah into a public attraction modeled on Graceland. The city approved the plan, but almost immediately, trouble gathered around it. Neighbors in the gated community that had grown up around the ranch over the years began complaining about noise and traffic. Then, CSD LLC entered Chapter 11 bankruptcy before the attraction even opened. Newton's business partner, Texas billionaire Lacy Harbor, who owned 70% of CSD, ended up trying to push the project forward through lawsuits and constant disruption. Even before the public could properly walk through the place, the numbers had already started to drift away from reality. In August 2013, the property was listed for $70 million. No one bought it. The tour finally did open on September 18, 2015, beginning with a VIP event attended by Carrot Top, Lance Burton, Clint Holmes, and Sabrina Bryan. At first, there was real interest. Within 5 days, about 400 visitors a day were touring Newton's former home. For a moment, it looked as though the Graceland idea might actually work. Then came the lawsuits. In 2017, a woman sued Newton and CSD over an incident that allegedly took place that year when her teenage daughter was bitten by Newton's pet capuchin monkey during a public tour. Newton's wife, Kathleen, said the family was not directly involved in operations at that time. Then, in April 2020, another lawsuit was filed over a second monkey bite that had happened in 2018. And as if the place needed even more strange drama, Newton himself was bitten by a brown recluse spider on the property in July 2017 and was hospitalized in critical condition. Jackie Gleason: some celebrity houses are oversized, some are flashy, and some are just strange. Jackie Gleason's place in Cortlandt Manor, New York, belongs in a category of its own. In the mid-1950s, CBS gave Gleason 6 acres of land just outside Peekskill as part of his contract package. Instead of building a normal luxury home, he imagined something far stranger and far more personal. Working with Robert Sika, a student of Frank Lloyd Wright, he designed a property that looked like it had landed rather than been built. The main structure was prefabricated by a Scandinavian shipbuilder inside an airplane hangar, then taken apart and trucked to the site. What emerged was unlike almost anything else in American residential design. There was a 50-foot diameter circular mansion called the Mothership. There was also a smaller round guest house called the Scout Ship, along with a round storage building and 2 swimming pools. Gleason believed in flying saucers, and that belief was not a casual hobby. He later claimed that President Richard Nixon had personally taken him to Homestead Air Force Base in Florida in 1973 to show him alien bodies. He told the story only to 2 people under promises of secrecy, but it eventually leaked. Gleason never denied it. And once you know that, the house makes even more sense. He had told the architects that the mothership should feel like a musical note that never ends. So everything inside was made to follow that idea. There are no right angles anywhere. Not in the cabinets, not in the furniture, not even in the 8-foot master bed. The original cork floors are still there. Italian marble runs through the bars, the fireplaces, and the staircase. Gleason even bought a quarry in Italy and flew the artisans over because he wanted to make sure there was enough marble to complete the vision exactly as he imagined it. The project was finished in 1959, and it cost $650,000 to build, which works out to roughly $6 million today. That was a huge amount, but the result was not just a house. It was a stage set, a social hub, and a personal statement all at once. Frank Sinatra, Marilyn Monroe, Joe DiMaggio, and Nixon himself all attended parties there. The main house had 3 bars and a marble dance floor. Gleason used it as part studio, part home, and part entertainment compound for the celebrities who orbited his CBS show. Then, as often happens, the story shifted away from its creator. Gleason sold the property back to CBS a few years later when he moved his show to Miami Beach. After that, it passed through 2 more owners before a retired orthodontist bought it in 1976 for $150,000, which would be about $660,000 today. That buyer and his family held on to the estate for more than 40 years. More importantly, they cared for it with what one realtor later described as obsessive loyalty to Gleason's original vision. So while the house may have looked unusual to almost everyone else, it survived because someone treated it as something worth preserving. Kanye West. In 2018, Kanye West put together what looked like the beginning of another giant personal project. He bought a 1.25-acre property in Calabasas, California, for $2.2 million. Then he added around 300 acres of surrounding land for another $4 million. Altogether, the investment reached $6 million. The main residence had 6 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, and 2 guest houses. At first, the compound had purpose and energy. West used it as the base for his Sunday service performances, and later as headquarters for his Donda Academy private school. So it did not begin as a forgotten place. It began as an active one. Then, in 2019, West added the feature that pushed the property into the public imagination. He built a set of geodesic domes there, which he described in interviews as Yeezy home prototypes, meant to explore housing solutions for Los Angeles's homeless population. The idea was ambitious, strange, and very Kanye. But almost as soon as the domes appeared, the project ran into trouble. The Los Angeles County Department of Public Works ordered him to tear them down after neighbors complained about noise, traffic, and a steady flow of unpermitted construction vehicles moving along the residential road at all hours. West then built a wall around the property and mostly stopped showing up. That was when the place started to turn. By September 2020, the house was already boarded up. Over the next 4 years, the condition of the property worsened in a very visible way. Photos published by the Daily Mail and backed up by aerial footage from independent drone operators showed a steady collapse. The front entrance developed a huge open hole. Debris and broken roofing material were scattered across the driveway. Shingles ended up in heaps on the ground. Parts of the driveway chipped away. Sections of the walls around the main structure fell down, leaving gaps in the fencing. The white fabric wrapped around the perimeter fence began to tear and fray. The circular Yeezy dome shelters, once covered in red fabric, started to look less like futuristic design experiments and more like the remains of a burnt-out circus. Nearby, a 4x4 tank and a barbecue smoker sat on the lawn beside a damaged partition, making the whole scene feel even stranger. At the same time, West's wider life was also breaking apart. His divorce from Kim Kardashian was finalized in November 2022. Kardashian kept the nearby Hidden Hills compound, which the couple had originally bought in 2014 for $20 million, and then transformed with another $20 million in renovations under Belgian designer Axel Vervoord. West, who had once talked about owning an entire block of Calabasas, ended up renting a $20,000 a month apartment in West Hollywood after his anti-Semitic remarks in late 2022 led to the collapse of the Adidas deal that had supported his billionaire image. Villa Maggio, in 1967, Frank Sinatra decided to build something that felt like an escape from the world. Not just a house, but a place where everything slowed down. High above the Coachella Valley, on a quiet plateau in Pinyon Crest, 4,300 feet up, construction began on what would become Villa Maggio. He worked closely with Palm Desert architect Ross Patton. Together, they shaped a mid-century mountaintop home that felt both private and powerful. Sinatra named it after Private Angelo Maggio, the role that earned him an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor in 1953 for From Here to Eternity. The name was personal. It carried weight. The cost reached $1.9 million back then. It took 3 full years to complete. And when it was finally done, it did not feel like just a home. It felt like a world of its own. The main house stretched across 6,428 square feet. 5 bedrooms, 5.5 bathrooms. Then came the extras, and they kept going. A 3-bedroom guest house with 5 bathrooms. A pool house with its own bedroom, 2 bathrooms and saunas. A helipad, a lighted tennis court, space for 24 cars, wide-open entertaining areas with a fire pit, a resort-style pool that looked out over endless desert. The land itself covered 7.5 acres, almost completely hidden from everything below. Up there, the sky stayed clear most days. Quiet. Still. Sinatra built it for rest, but also for life. This was where the Rat Pack gathered, where dignitaries visited, where powerful people came together away from the noise. Then something strange happened. In the 1980s, Sinatra gave the entire estate away to Loyola Marymount University. No clear reason, no detailed explanation. Later, real estate agent Marcus Cantor would say Sinatra received an honorary doctorate as part of the transfer. But still, the question stayed. Why give away something so personal? The university used it as a retreat for faculty. For a short time, it worked. But slowly, the place lost its shine. It was not maintained the way it should have been. Eventually, LMU sold it. The buyer stayed unnamed. And then, almost immediately, the property changed hands again. Just 10 days later. This time to someone who never even saw it in person. That buyer would later be convicted of money laundering, sent to federal prison. And before he could ever spend a single night inside Villa Maggio, he died. The house moved on again. A dentist bought it, then sold it to the current owners in the early 2000s. They planned to stay for 2 years. They never left. More than 20 years passed. Still, the story did not settle. In 2015, the estate went up for sale. Then it disappeared. Then it came back in 2021 with a $425 million price. Listings came and went. At one point, an extra 2.5 acres of buildable land was added to make the deal more appealing. Even in 2024, it sat there, waiting. And that is what makes it strange. A home designed by Sinatra himself. A place filled with history, parties, and power. A property that would cost more than $15 million to build today. Yet it struggles to find a buyer. Local brokers have their reasons. The elevation feels too far from Palm Springs for retirees who want convenience. And younger buyers with money often look toward the ocean, not the mountains. The Reynolds Ranch. At one point, Everything seemed to be working for Burt Reynolds. In the early 1990s, he owned 153 acres in Jupiter Farms, Florida. Wide land, open space. Around 150 horses moved across the property. It was not just a ranch, it was a lifestyle. There was even a chapel. That is where he married Lonnie Anderson in April 1988. Part of the land turned into a working film studio. Scenes from B.L. Stryker were filmed there. Pieces of Smokey and the Bandit, too. There were stories about the land. One said Al Capone once built a hideout there back in 1923. Whether true or not, it added to the feeling of the place. Reynolds made it open. Kids from nearby could ride horses. Fundraisers were held. Friends from the film world stopped by often. It felt alive. Then slowly, things began to fall apart. After years at the top, Reynolds made a series of bad financial decisions. He and his friend Buddy Killen invested millions into restaurants they did not understand. At the same time, his divorce from Lonnie Anderson in 1993 became expensive. Legal fees alone reached about $47,000 a month. Anderson received $15,000 monthly in support, plus $9,000 more for her home. Then came another blow. CBS sued him for $3.7 million tied to Evening Shade. By 1996, the numbers no longer worked. Reynolds filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. His assets were listed at $6.65 million. His debts climbed past $11 million. Even his toupee maker appeared on the list of creditors. Owed a six-figure amount. He owned a lot. Ranches, mansions, a lake house, a mountain cabin, a private jet, a helicopter, custom cars, even an inventory of toupees worth over $100,000. But ownership does not always mean control. In 1999, the Jupiter Farms Ranch was sold to the Palm Beach County School District. The plan was to build a middle school. That plan failed. Not enough residents. Years later, in the early 2010s, the land was sold again. This time to K. Hovnanian Homes. It was divided into 30 luxury lots. Today, it is a gated equestrian community called Reynolds Ranch. The place where horses once ran freely is now carefully divided, structured, controlled. Yet Reynolds kept something. Through a legal rule in Florida known as the Homestead Protection Loophole, his primary residence could not be taken by creditors. Before changes in 2005, people could shift assets into Florida homes and protect them completely. Reynolds did exactly that. He kept his Valhalla estate in Palm Beach, a 3.4-acre property with a 12,500-square-foot mansion and a guest house. While almost everything else slipped away, that stayed. He passed away in Jupiter in September 2018 at the age of 82. Johnny Cash. For decades, Johnny Cash and June Carter Cash lived in a large lakeside home in Hendersonville, Tennessee. It stood near Old Hickory Lake, strong, 3 stories tall. The house had been built in 1967 by builder Braxton Dixon. There was no strict plan. He built based on feeling. Stone, wood, marble, even barnwood, whatever fit in the moment. Cash saw it while it was still being built, and he could not let it go. He pushed until Dixon agreed to sell. Inside those walls, music came to life. Songs like Ring of Fire, Folsom Prison Blues, and I Walk the Line were written there. Bob Dylan visited. Billy Graham visited. One day, Chris Christopherson landed a helicopter on the lawn just to deliver a song. Near the end, the music video for Hurt was filmed inside the house. It felt heavy, real, almost like a goodbye. When Johnny and June passed away in 2003, the house became something more than a home. It became a place people came to remember. A shrine. Then, in 2006, Barry Gibb bought the property for about $2.3 million. He and his wife Linda planned to restore it, to bring it back to life, maybe even write music there. But before that could happen, everything changed. On April 10, 2007, workers were treating the house with a wood preservative. It was highly flammable. At around 1:40 in the afternoon, the fire started. Fire trucks arrived quickly, within 5 minutes. But it was already too late. The flames moved fast, faster than anything the local fire department had seen in a home. Within hours, the house was gone. Only the stone chimneys and steel frame remained. The cause was never fully confirmed. Only one thing was clear. The fire had spread through the preservative. And this was not the first tragedy in that area. Roy Orbison had lost his home nearby in a fire back in 1968. 2 of his sons died. Luther Perkins, Cash's longtime guitarist, also died in a house fire in the same neighborhood. It created a quiet pattern, one that people noticed but could never explain. Barry Gibb chose not to rebuild. The land changed hands quietly. Today, the place where so much music was created is just a fenced piece of land. A guard shack, a rustic fence, and the remains of stone chimneys that still stand where the house once was. Cash's final days were not even spent there. He moved to a smaller house across the street, known as Mama Cash's house. The large home had become too difficult to move through, too much to handle.